I wasn't meant to hear it. I'd come around the side corridor behind the reception hall, checking on the centerpieces. White ranunculus, blush peonies, and gold-trimmed roses. The catering staff bustled about, laughter echoing from the kitchen. But the voice that stopped me cold wasn't theirs. It was Cassian's. I heard the smirk in his tone before I even saw his profile. He leaned casually against the brick wall near the vendor entrance, speaking to a friend with too much ease for a man about to vow forever. Her mom's loaded. He continued. The transfer goes through next week. After that, we'll see. My breath caught, but I didn't move, didn't gasp. I simply adjusted the boutonniere box in my hands and turned back toward the banquet room like nothing had happened. My heart hammered, but my face never betrayed it. I've learned over the years how to walk while wounded, how to carry silence like armor. Cassian never noticed me, or maybe he did and didn't care. Either way, it told me everything I needed to know. I found the floral coordinator near the bar, handed over the box, and smiled like any proud mother of the bride would. She complimented the arrangements. I nodded, said they were just like Brinley wanted. Classic, elegant, quietly radiant. Just like her. But my thoughts weren't on peonies anymore. They were on signatures, transfers, papers that hadn't yet changed hands. I stepped outside into the early afternoon sunlight. The street buzzed with soft traffic and wedding guests, trickling into nearby cafes. I sat on a stone ledge near the hedges and stared at nothing in particular. My hands were shaking now, delayed reaction. But I didn't cry. This wasn't the first betrayal I'd ever faced, but it might be the last I'd allow unchecked. Not this time. Not with my daughter. I stood, brushed off my skirt, and walked toward the parking lot. The documents were still at home, unsigned. And for now, that was my greatest weapon. I got home just after dark. The reception hall was still glowing when I left. Strings of golden bulbs across the rafters, music swelling, laughter blooming like the flowers I'd chosen myself. Brinley had no idea, not yet. I walked straight to my study without removing my shoes. Bottom drawer left side, behind outdated tax forms and one faded birthday card I'd never thrown out. There it was, a yellow folder, thick and clean, labeled in Ellis's handwriting. My late husband always said, "Don't leave the things that matter in a safe you never open." I sat down and opened it. Inside were documents we'd spent months preparing. The transfer of $750,000 in assets, a portion of the lake property, 2 investment accounts with growth potential. All arranged as a gift for our only daughter, to be activated on her wedding day. I remembered when we were supposed to take them to the notary. Brinley had just chosen the venue. Cassian had smiled too widely at dinner. I was meant to sign and send everything the following week. Then the flu hit. Winter came fast and sharp that year. I was out for nearly 3 weeks, exhausted, coughing, unable to keep food down. By the time I recovered, there was always something else: final fittings, seating charts, Brinley's endless questions about centerpieces and ceremony music. So the papers stayed in the folder. Signed by Ellis, approved by the attorney, sealed by the notary, but not by me. One missing signature, mine. I stared at the space meant for my name. The blank line felt suddenly holy. Cassian had no idea. He thought the money was already his to touch. I closed the folder slowly and placed it back in the drawer. Sometimes the things you forget to do are the things that save you. A pause mistaken for procrastination might become the only wall standing between innocence and ruin. Tonight, that wall was still standing because my pen had never touched the page. The night felt long, though I hardly moved. I stayed in my study, the soft tick of the grandfather clock filling the silence Ellis used to occupy. I hadn't touched his chair in months, but tonight I sat in it, hands folded, breath steady, eyes on the darkened window. No city noise, no movement. Just the echo of an old voice I hadn't let myself hear in years. Uff. Don't pass the crown before you know if the heir respects the throne. Ellis had said it one fall evening years ago, after we attended a wedding for a colleague's son. The groom had spoken poorly to his mother at the rehearsal dinner, something smug and sharp. Ellis had watched it all in silence, and later that night he'd poured 2 whiskeys and left that sentence sitting between us. I didn't understand it then. Not fully. But I do now. I picked up my phone. Not in anger, not in panic, just clarity. The first call was to Malcolm, my lawyer of 20 years. He answered on the second ring, groggy but alert when he heard my name. I asked him to double-check the status of the asset transfer files and ensure they remained unprocessed. He agreed, no questions asked. The second call was more delicate. I hadn't spoken to Vera in over a year, not since Ellis's funeral. She didn't work out of an office, never advertised her services, but she had eyes where most people never bothered to look. When I asked if she still took personal surveillance work, she simply said, "Who's the target?" I gave her Cassian's name. I didn't need fireworks or scandal. I just needed truth. The kind you catch in silence, in receipts, in whispers exchanged when they think no one's listening. We agreed on terms. She would begin the next morning. I placed the phone down gently, then returned to Ellis's chair. My daughter was still asleep in another house, dreaming of vows and flowers, and I had just declared a silent war to protect her from the man she thought she loved. Cassian was all teeth and polish at the rehearsal dinner. He moved from table to table like a practiced politician. Hand on shoulders, quiet compliments, a wink here, a laugh there. Even my sister said, "He's really grown into the role, hasn't he?" I smiled faintly and said nothing. People always mistake charisma for character, but I was watching, every flicker, every pause. His hand kept drifting to his pocket where he carried two phones. One with a cracked case, the other newer, sleeker. He used the first around Brinley. The second stayed hidden until he thought no one was looking. No one except me. After dinner, we lingered outside near the valet line. The summer air warm and buzzing with conversation. Brinley was talking with her cousin about cake flavors. Cassian had slipped away, standing half-shadowed by the valet booth with his back to most of us. But not to me. He was texting on the second phone. His thumb moved quickly, confidently. I pretended to check my own messages, and just as he tilted the screen, the preview flashed in bold white letters. "I told you. After the check clears." That was all I saw. That was all I needed. I didn't confront him. Not there. Not yet. I angled my phone as if texting someone and carefully captured him, the message, and the license plate of the car that picked him up. Minutes later, I sent everything to Vera before I even left the lot. He was a man playing parts, switching roles like phones, charming when seen, ruthless when not. But there's something I learned years ago in business, something Ellis always said: the fastest way to unravel a lie is to let the liar keep talking. So I smiled at Cassian when he kissed Brinley's cheek. I told her she looked radiant. I hugged her longer than usual. Then I walked to my car and waited until the headlights were out of view before I exhaled. Vera's reply came an hour later. One line. "I'll start with the number." Brinley was humming when I walked past her door the next morning. I paused in the hallway, just out of sight, listening to her voice rise and fall with soft rhythm. The makeup artist was already there. Curling irons warming on the vanity, lace gown hanging like a cloud by the window. My daughter sat in a silk robe, sipping orange juice, her eyes lit with anticipation. She was glowing. I felt it in my throat, that old ache between pride and fear. The one I first knew when she took her first steps, wobbling toward me with arms outstretched. The ache I swallowed when she told me Cassian had proposed. I had seen the signs, heard the words, caught the lies. But she hadn't. Not yet. What kind of mother tears the veil from her daughter's joy on the morning she's waited her whole life for? I stepped away from the door and opened my purse. Inside was a sealed envelope, neatly compiled with Vera's help the night before, screenshots of messages, photos of Cassian outside a hotel in Buckhead, transfers from a private account in another woman's name, call logs timestamped, a copy of the text I'd seen by the valet booth, and at the top, written in my own hand, "He's betting you won't read this." I waited until the makeup artist went downstairs for more brushes. Then I slipped in quietly, careful not to let the door creak. Brinley had her eyes closed, music playing low from the Bluetooth speaker. I placed the envelope against the vanity mirror, propped beside her perfume bottle, then I turned and walked out. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. This wasn't my moment to destroy. It was hers to see clearly, if she chose to. And if she didn't, I'd be ready to catch her when the illusion collapsed. Either way, the truth was no longer locked away. The chapel was hushed, almost reverent, as Brinley appeared at the far end of the aisle. Light from the stained glass framed her like a painting. For a moment, no one breathed. I sat 3 rows back, still composed. Cassian stood at the altar, hands folded, jaw tight. Only I noticed the way his eyes flicked toward her bouquet, then back to her face. She moved with grace. Her gown whispered over the floor. Each step echoed in the silence, like it belonged to something ancient and final. When she reached the front, the officiant smiled and nodded. But Brinley didn't turn. She didn't take Cassian's hand. Instead, she stopped just short of him. Slowly, she reached into her bouquet and pulled out the envelope. My envelope. She held it for only a second before letting it fall between them. It landed flat on the stone, sharp and deliberate. Gasps rose around us. Brinley's voice didn't shake. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the sanctuary like a clean blade. Let's not pretend we don't know exactly what you did. Cassian blinked. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The officiant stammered something, looking to me then to the guests. Chairs creaked. Phones stayed lowered. No one knew what to do. Brinley turned to the audience, then back to Cassian. Her face was unreadable, no tears, no rage, just clarity. This isn't a mistake, she said softly. It's a correction. She didn't need to explain what was in the letter. She didn't need to say, inheritance, or divorce. Everyone already knew. Cassian's shoulders sagged under the weight of his silence. Brinley lifted her gown slightly and stepped back from him. Not running, not breaking, just retreating on her own terms. Then she walked toward me. I rose to meet her. She took my arm without a word, and we moved down the aisle together, past the flowers, past the stunned guests, past the illusion of what was never real. Just as we reached the chapel doors, the church bell above us rang once, long and low. Brinley, wait. Cassian called after her. Don't walk away like this. She didn't turn around. He stepped forward as if to follow, but I moved first, blocking his path. My heels clicked once on the stone. No need to chase what never belonged to you. His eyes narrowed. You don't get to. I do, I said. Then I lifted a slim leather folder from my handbag and handed it to the man who had just entered through the side door. He was dressed plainly, but the seal on his badge said enough. Cassian froze. You remember the prenuptial agreement, I said. The one you insisted didn't matter. Just paperwork. His face flushed. I turned the pages slowly, deliberately, until I found the final clause. The one Ellis and I had discussed years ago when Brinley was still in college. The clause we never thought we'd need, yet kept updated anyway. This, I said, tapping the signature line, is the amendment you initialed last month. You believed it confirmed your access to Brinley's inheritance. What you didn't know was that it also triggered a full audit and asset lock if verbal intent to defraud was ever documented. The color drained from his face. You signed it the day after your second phone call with. I glanced at the investigator near the rear door. Camille Travers. A rustle moved through the crowd. Chairs shifted. A few people rose slowly to their feet. The officiant took a step back, unsure where to stand. Cassian looked around, then back at me, voice strained. You can't. No. I agreed. But it's exactly how contracts work. The two legal aides approached from the side aisle. One held a folder. The other carried a sealed envelope. They didn't speak, simply stood beside me, calm, professional, ready. The venue was silent now. No music, no whispers. Just the sound of Cassian's ragged breathing. I turned to the guests, offering the smallest nod. The ceremony is over. Thank you for witnessing the truth. That night, the house was too quiet. I found Brinley curled on the living room sofa, knees pulled to her chest, her gown replaced by sweatpants and a hoodie far too big for her. Her hair still carried traces of the updo, but most of it had come undone, like everything else. She didn't look up when I entered, just shifted slightly to make room. I sat beside her and waited. The silence between us wasn't cold, it was bruised, fragile. Then she broke. The first sob cracked through her like a dam giving way. She folded into me, her voice muffled against my shoulder. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She choked. Why didn't you stop it before today? I held her tighter, stroking her back the way I had when she was a child waking from nightmares. I needed you to choose it, I whispered. Not because I forced you to see, but because you were strong enough to face the truth when it mattered most. And you were, sweetheart. You were. She cried harder then. Not just for the betrayal, but for the wedding that never was, the future that crumbled, the trust that had been broken long before she ever walked down that aisle. But she was free now. Free from a man who saw her as nothing more than a transaction, who would have spent years taking from her before discarding her like yesterday's news. The papers, she said eventually, pulling back to look at me. The inheritance. Still in the drawer, I said gently. Still unsigned. Still yours to decide what to do with. When you're ready. She nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her tear-streaked eyes. You saved me. No, darling, I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You saved yourself, I just made sure you had the choice. Outside, the summer evening settled into darkness. Inside, my daughter and I sat together in the quiet aftermath of a disaster averted. not by a mother's interference, but by a daughter's courage to choose truth over beautiful lies. The unsigned papers could wait. Tonight, we had each other, and that was more than enough. 6 months later, Brinley started her own consulting firm. She used a small portion of her inheritance, which she eventually chose to accept, with new legal protections in place, to fund her dream of helping small businesses grow. Cassian's fraud investigation resulted in charges. His pattern of targeting wealthy women for their assets became clear once authorities began digging. Other victims came forward. Justice, as Ellis used to say, doesn't always wear a wedding dress. Sometimes it wears a badge. As for me, I learned that sometimes a mother's greatest gift to her child isn't protection from the storm, but ensuring they have shelter when they choose to step out of it. The yellow folder still sits in my desk drawer, a reminder that some signatures are worth waiting for, and some are worth never making at all. In the end, the most important document wasn't the one that transferred money. It was the one that transferred strength.